The Road to War. Written and narrated by John Miro. Get more at servingworlds.com. 8. March 2nd, 2349. Planet Reach, South Reach City, Government Row. The yellow sky was crystal clear above the center of the city despite the crisscross of missile plumes and burning buildings in the distance. Lehu Li Zhang, called sign Paladin, stepped his mechanized battlesuit out of the pressure hatch onto the roof of a low building. He swiveled the mech's head, a complex sensor pod stacked on top of the armored cockpit, until he was sure the roof was clear. "Nap time," he whispered. The 4 pads surrounding his head captured the memory engrams associated with those words and began the power-down cycle. The most complex cybernetic interface system ever devised walked the 6-meter-tall war machine clear of the hatch. The hiss of air circulating through the suit's vents died off. The low whine coming from the tri-barrel assemblies on each arm faded out. 2 large humanoid arms bent at the elbows and locked into position. 2 legs, modeled after a pack animal's, bent low to the ground for stability. Finally, the cockpit dropped between the legs, and the heads-up display being projected onto the pilot's eyeballs winked out. "Like you have every reason in the world to be here," Lee muttered to himself, plastering on a smile. Lee, a newly minted captain in the newly minted Independent Congress of Reach, did have every reason in this world to be here. But the Earther soldiers who still controlled this part of the city would disagree with those reasons if he were discovered. Violently. He pulled and turned the manual canopy release. Reach's thin atmosphere sucked greedily at the suit's warmer, overpressured interior as the back of the mech opened up. The nervous sweat on the back of his neck chilled as Lee twisted his legs out of the suit and knelt them on the ledge of its armored backside. He tugged his arms out of the control sleeves, reached up and grabbed onto the handholds between the shoulder-mounted missile pods. Finally, he closed his eyes and pulled his head out of the neural interface crown. After years using the cybernetic piloting system, the wave of dizziness passed quickly, and Lee climbed down the 8 feet of metal backside to rooftop. He caught a glimpse of the patchy brown Gov uniform he was wearing in place of his own. A necessary camouflage here in the belly of the beast. "Sorry for littering in you, girl," he told his mech, rapping his knuckles on one 12-foot-high leg as he surveyed the eerie calm and order surrounding him. Several city blocks ahead of Lee, 3 elegant stone towers, shot through with blue crystal, rose into the air. Several deep blocks behind him stood 3 more towers. Beyond the towers, in all directions, lay swaths of destruction. Within their borders lay a century of pristine architectural marvels, domed ornamental gardens, statues, and carved walkways. Government Row. A pair of fighters circled high above the city. Lee stared as he twisted the knob of the canister on his waist. Far too late, explosions shook air behind the jets. He tugged a plastic tube at his neck up over his ears and upper lip. 2 nasal prongs fit inside his nostrils, and warm, humid oxygen trickled into his lungs, making up the difference between what Reach could provide and what the human body needed. He sketched a rough salute toward the departing birds before turning back to his mech. As of yesterday, the fledgling Reacher government controlled the raft of military satellites in orbit around the colony's southern hemisphere. The only planes in the skies belonged to the ICR. Independent Congress of Reach. It sounded way too fancy for a bunch of farmers and miners, Lee thought, as he unpacked 3 long, narrow boxes off the mech's right leg. Still, he admitted to himself, as he arranged the boxes in a semicircle behind his suit, it was nice to lay claim to those 3 letters, after being branded a terrorist for so long. Lee walked to the front of his suit and struggled with 2 bulky crates, lugging them a dozen feet ahead and to either side of his mech. The second heavy crate had greasy handles and fell to the ground with a crunch. Lee winced, but the box behaved. Tracer fire drew his attention to the far right tower. Anti-aircraft guns mounted on a crystal perch grown into the air outside the building threw lead after the long-gone planes. Their phosphorescent orange lit up the sky. Watching the fireworks, he rubbed grease from the crates off on the front of the earther uniform he wore. That barrage fell well short too, but the fact that Gov still had arms to waste in idle threats served as a reminder of why Lee was here. After months of all-out war, the Reachers controlled their colony's equatorial settlements, polar outposts, and most of the rail lines between the only real cities on the entire planet. Southreach in the southern hemisphere and Northreach in the northern. Today, the Reachers would liberate both cities from EarthGov, and more importantly, each city's spaceport, or die trying. It was going to be bloody, but there was no other choice. The siege of Southreach had to end today, or many more Reachers would die. Lee turned in a circle, examining the other government buildings in the row. 4 other rooftops were occupied by black mechs like his own, but newer and prettier. Fresh paint and putty hid the battle scars on Lee's mech. The old girl had been through a lot since he'd liberated her from Earther control, but she remained as deadly as the day Earth sent her to Reach to keep the colonists in check. Both Lee and his mech's disguises were flimsy, but they would hold up from a distance. He just hoped nobody came for a closer look before he did what he came here to do. There was no chance of postponing this attack. No more time for peace talks or treaties. A convoy from Earth was due to appear in the sky any day now, and Reach had to remove Gov authority from the planet before it did. Otherwise, that convoy's supplies and reinforcements could keep this war going, keep Earthers killing Reachers. Lee put both hands on the waist-high wall and leaned over the side, eyeballing a puff of smoke at the base of the middle tower straight ahead. 2 blocks away and 10 stories below, a small force of Reacher mechs had just appeared around the tower, pouring their combined firepower into the weapons platform at its base. He slapped his palms against the brickwork of the low wall. Right on schedule. Air molecules were farther apart on Reach than on Earth, and sound traveled slower accordingly. It took a moment for the music of the assault to reach Lee's ears. When it did, he smiled a remorseless grin and pointed at the far side of the tower. Like clockwork, the expected EarthGov reinforcements pounded into view. Mechanized soldiers and armored vehicles advanced on the smoking ruin of the weapons platform, laying suppressive cover fire and bravely forcing the resistance mechs back from whence they'd come. But not before the Reacher mechs mowed through the first line of reinforcements. That would be Grunt's work, Lee was sure. Sergeant Garner was never one to avoid a fight. Even if that was his role today, to draw attention away from the massed invasion force gathering on the other side of Government Row. Well, he'd done that in spades. Now, Lee waited for some terrified junior officer to carry the news up the chain of command. Whistling, Lee walked back to his mech and cracked open a utility door on its waist. From inside the small padded compartment, he gently, lovingly withdrew a sniper rifle. You have been listening to Reach, The Road to War. Written and narrated by John Miro. Music, All This by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. Hear more of the story at servingworlds.com. Thank you for listening.